What's up everyone, I'm Gushy and welcome to the channel. In this video we're going to be going over an early to mid game build for both the Brrzerker and Spore Warden, two classes which have insane synergy and when combined creates a playstyle around using your ability as much as possible, making use of multiple buffs that we can get to increase our elemental and gun damage, and most importantly having a cute little mushroom companion. So in this video we're going to be going over the gear that I'm using, specifically what kind of perks you want to be looking out for, as well as the skills that I'm choosing throughout the skill tree, and how I plan to build this when I reach max level. Before I start, check out our Tiny Tina playlist where we already have videos on the other classes as well. Keep in mind that we can mix and match two different classes, so if these two class combinations don't work out for you, another set of classes might work for you. As a side note, all of this gameplay is on insane difficulty. This is still very much an early to mid game build, but later on we'll also see how this build turns out in Chaos 20 Chambers. So the class that I started off with is the Brrezerker, which has the passive and the skill that are most important to this build. The Brrzerker's class feat says that on action skill start, you go into an enrage mode where you get to deal bonus frost damage. The main goal of this build is to keep this enrage meter up as long as possible, and the main way we do this is through our ability called Feral Surge. Now the one thing that I really like about this ability is that one, there's an instant kill threshold at 20%, which means if enemies are below 20%, it's an insta kill. Of course this doesn't apply to bosses, but does apply to badass tiered enemies. The second thing which really synergizes well with our class feat is if you get a kill with Feral Surge, its cooldown is reset. I wanted to play this opening clip again because this is a perfect example of how this build should play like. Once we get an enemy's health down pretty low, we can activate Feral Surge, get that insta-kill, and then keep spamming this as long as we're getting these kills with Feral Surge. Now one thing to keep in mind is that Feral Surge also does a frost ability damage, which is taken into account before the kill threshold. So as you can see, even though some enemies aren't below 20%, I'm doing damage with Feral Surge, which then puts them below 20%, which will allow me to get those insta-kills. What's great about this is that if we increase our ability damage or increase our status effect damage, specifically our frost damage, we can basically increase this insta-kill threshold. The next thing I want to go over is how we get to this 20% threshold so we can use our ability, resetting it and repeating the process. To do this, we want to increase our gun damage and elemental damage, so getting to that threshold is much faster. The first way is through an enchant that I got on my shield, which says that on spell cast, it increases gun damage by 6% for 10 seconds. I know this is gear dependent, but this is something to look out for as you look for gear with more enchants. Now because we get this buff when we start our spell cast, we want our spell cooldown to be as low as possible, so we have as little downtime with this buff. Keep in mind that we're only looking for the cooldown and not the damage of this spell, because most of our damage will be coming from our guns and our ability. Luckily I got this Conjura spell, which has pretty high damage and has another key component which will also give us more buffs. Because this does fire 3 projectiles per cast and has an insane freeze chance at 50%, this is a surefire way to get that frost status effect procced on an enemy. Because this cooldown is pretty fast at 12 seconds, there's two main ways that I use this. One is at the beginning of a fight, just to activate that enchant and get that 6% damage buff. The other way is to slow a high health target, which will activate some skills in our skill tree. First is Ancestral Frost. This is just a flat buff to our frost damage, but in combination with our next skill, which is Icebreaker, our damage is scaled the closer the enemy is to being fully frozen. The next thing I want to talk about are a couple buffs that get enhanced while we are enraged, because ideally we're going to be enraged 100% of the time. These are a couple of skills to look out for. The first is Instinct. Reload speed and weapon swap speed is increased, and when enraged these effects are doubled. Currently I don't have any points in this yet, but this is something I'm definitely going to pick up, as I do find myself having a lot of downtime just reloading my gun. Next up is Cold Snap. Movement speed and frost efficiency is increased, and again while enraged these effects are doubled. Of course the frost efficiency is the status effect we're going for, so this is always helpful, but the movement speed is also really important, especially on bigger maps when enemies are spaced out. Again, this just removes the downtime you have when you're not shooting or you're not using your ability. Another skill to look out for is the Iron Squall. Again, this is something I'm definitely going to pick up as it increases your fire rate. This means more DPS, making it faster to use your ability and get that insta-kill. Now I'm not entirely sure how useful this will be, so this is something I'll have to test out later on when I get this skill. For the last part of our damage buffs, we have straight passive buffs to our gun damage, as well as our ability damage, which comes from the Spore Warden skill tree. So first up we have Eagle Eye, which gives an increased gun damage and increase to gun handling. Next we have Affinity, which actually increases our ability damage. Again, the more ability damage that we have, the higher the threshold is to get those insta-kills. So this is definitely something I'm going to be picking up. Next up we also have Bullseye, which increases our gun critical hit chance and our companion critical hit chance. This is something that I'm pretty interested in if I do need more damage as I reach the end game. Maybe increasing the critical hit chance and critical hit damage might come in handy. Alright, so we already get buffs from being enraged, we get buffs from using our spells, and we have some passive buffs. The last and final way that we can buff ourselves is through kills. The first skill that I want to go over is Windrunner from the Spore Warden skill tree. On a kill we'll get increased movement speed and fire rate, which can stack, which again synergizes well with our already increased movement speed from Cold Snap in the Brrezerker skill tree, and of course more DPS with the increased fire rate. For other kill skills, they either support increasing our ability cooldown, keeping us enraged. For last skill in the Brrezerker skill tree we have Blood of the Fallen. Since our action skill is kind of like a one shot instead of a duration, we're going to be reducing the skill cooldown, just in case we don't get that kill to refresh the cooldown. On top of that, with the Spore Warden skill, Bounty of the Hunt, as we get a kill, our action skill cooldown rate is increased for a brief duration. This should go up to 20% for 12 seconds, again synergizing really well with the Brrezerker skill tree. So with all these buffs out of the way, next thing I want to talk about is survivability. We're mostly focusing on damage buffs because I found that I really don't need that many skills to keep my health up. The first skill, which is a must, is called Blood Frenzy. This is a kill skill, and when maxed out, 9% of the maximum health is restored on a kill. Not only that, 3 seconds of our enraged time is also restored. So another skill that really helps support the enraged playstyle. Next up we have Unarmored Defenses. This is something that I might get rid of once I respec. It basically takes half of your shield or ward and just returns it to health. Of course, the more health that you have, the more percent that gets returned by Blood Frenzy. With your skill, your shield becomes less important, and all you have to worry about is a high ward amount, because recharge rate and wait time doesn't really matter with the next part of this healing, and this is because of the melee weapon that we're using. Now this is another really important part of the build, and pretty much the main reason why I have so little health skills. This flat blade that I have has a perk called Vampire, where melee attacks restore 7% of your maximum health and maximum ward. Now you don't even have to do that much damage or get a kill with it, it's just straight up every hit will return health and shield. So again, the more health or the more shield that you get, the more percent that you'll get back. For anyone interested in the Brrezerker but more of a melee playstyle, this is an absolute must. This will easily keep you alive. In this example, I'm only meleeing enemies, and to put things into context, I have no skills invested into increasing melee damage, but I'm easily able to get through this encounter just by keeping my shield and health up. To finish this video, I did want to go over some of the downsides of this build. First of all, it is pretty reliant on keeping your enrage meter up by resetting your ability through kills. If you don't get that kill with the ability, it takes a whole 32 seconds to get that skill again, mostly relying on those perks to reduce the cooldown. Also, you might have seen in the opening clip, but sometimes the aiming for Feral Surge is kind of bad, which has you totally missing your target and not resetting the ability. Finally, the last thing and the reason why I've been increasing gun damage is that this is really good against mobs, but less efficient on bosses. We are pretty reliant on getting ad kills to get some of our buffs. Luckily, most boss fights do have a couple of ads that we can quickly kill and get those buffs, but if it is just one enemy that has a lot of health, our DPS does go down a little bit. With that, I hope you guys found this video helpful. Let me know in the comment section down below if you're using either the Brrezerker or the Spore Warden. I think it's really cool that we get to mix and match different classes, which essentially gives us a lot of opportunities to see different types of builds. As always, thank you guys for watching and hope to catch you in the next one.
Oh, what will we do with a sunken sailor? What will we do with this funky whaler? What should we do for a crew? Unveil her need, we're reforming. We say all men wanted, we say all men wanted, we say all men wanted, step in, we're employing.